You're listening to CreepGeeks Paranormal and Weird News Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/CheapGeek. So it begins again. Welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast, episode number 194.
Paranormal connectivity and general weirdness.
Yeah. So it begins again. Welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast. Unless this is your very first time listening, and welcome. Good to see you. Now, if you're a repeat offender, we're always glad to have you here, and we do appreciate your support. And this particular episode of the CreepGeeks Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Our patrons are
Dave, Adam, James, Bobby, John, and now Isis.
Yeah. So if you want to support the podcast, you can certainly do that. We have a link for you. It's in our show notes, and all of our show notes are on our website. So if you want to go back and do some research on your own later, you can certainly do that. You know what the link is?
Patreon.com/CreepGeeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm Greg.
I'm Omi.
And the CreepGeeks Podcast is an offbeat news podcast. It takes a lighthearted approach to the paranormal, cryptid, strange, silly, right?
Yeah.
And trending tech topics circulating the web, which is primarily what we're going to talk about this particular episode. And we like to broadcast our news from our underground bunker deep in the mountains of western North Carolina.
You know, I actually had somebody ask about that.
You told them it was none of their damn business?
No, I told them we really did live in an underground bunker in the mountains of western North Carolina.
And they're like, you guys are freaking weirdos. And I was like, your shirt's on backwards, bro. And they're like, check. And they're like, what? I'm like, haha, just kidding.
No, actually, a lot of comments have been, it's 2020. I'm so jealous of you right now.
Yeah. But with every great sacrifice comes a sacrifice, and that sacrifice is broadband.
True.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm Greg.
I'm Omi.
And I don't know if we just did that, but anyway,
Yes,
we're going to go ahead and start the podcast. We have lots of interesting things to talk about, and we are primarily paranormal and weird news. We do some investigation stuff as well. We like to go ahead and investigate stuff and, experience it. So we do that. We're not like, other podcasters that just talk about it in great and agonizing detail. Not only do we talk about it in great and agonizing detail, when we have the opportunity, we go out and investigate it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand. Now, if it's too scary or super dangerous, then we're not going to do that. I'm not scuba diving to the bottom of the ocean to go see what animals live there. That's what Jacques Cousteau and his organization was all about.
Okay.
It's not me, man. I'm trying to finish 2020 on a strong note, and it's just simple. I just want to be alive, man. That's it. Break some neck bones. It changes your perspective for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing all the dangerous things like making sure both my socks match.
Would you stop?
That's true, though. It's just, it's part of what we do.
Okay.
So we find things we talk about on the internet, right, with you guys. And we experience things, and we talk about those, and we share our experiences, and people contact us and share their experiences as well. And there's a way you can do that. We have a phone number for you.
That phone number is going to be 575-208-4025.
Yeah, so you can call and leave a voicemail message if you want, or you can actually click on our contact link on our website, creepgeeks.com, and you can send us some information that way if you'd like to share or relay a story or an experience you've had.
You can also reach out to us on social media. Our Facebook page is CreepGeeks Podcast. We also have a group that we're trying to grow, and that's pretty easy. It's CreepGeeks Facebook group.
Yeah.
You can actually interact with us, share funny stories, share creepy stories, share memes, share talking points.
Yeah.
It's a fun time.
Just be a part.
Yeah.
Won't hurt you. It's probably about the most safe thing you can do aside from matching socks. It's pretty exciting. Okay, so anyway, I came across some things I thought was pretty cool, and it's just basically how do you categorize this sort of thing? And it just kind of boils down to just general weirdness.
Okay.
So I want to talk about that first before we talk about paranormal connectivity, because that's something that's a little bit different. But, when I found out that things were a little strange, I started finding other things that are a little strange. And one of the things I came up with seemed like, okay, this is just kind of weird, right? And a couple of these things were in Arizona, right?
Okay.
Which can be kind of weird, but I thought you might like this because clouds of bats were flying over Phoenix, right?
Okay.
And you could see them on the weather radar. And these are meteorologists. These are weather nerds that spotted these like clouds of bats emerging over Phoenix, Arizona at dusk.
That's pretty cool.
Now, we've experienced something like that ourselves in New Mexico, where we actually went in, certain times of the year, you could see this great bat outflight.
Yeah.
Where they fly out of these caves. And there can be thousands of them, these large, are they Mexican? I don't want to say fruit bats, but they migrate. So, they start to build up.
It's the smaller, cuter ones, which are the Mexican freetail bats, and that's the ones that are actually in this article as well.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, it's the same bats?
Yeah.
Well, I was a little distracted by one of the places on the National Weather Service radar map that says Tortilla Flat. And I was like, oh, yeah, New Mexico, Arizona. Yeah, got some. So these are the pretty bats, and we've actually experienced some of these when we went to, what's that place that we used to go to all the time?
So it's a gray area, so I'm going to explain it all out. In the Elma Pay, there's a large sanctioned wilderness area. That's the Elma Pay Conservation Area, and you can do free camping there. Right next to it, though, like literally right next to it, is El Morro National Monument. Now, between those, the boundaries kind of intersect because the caves that go through both areas cross that boundary. You can actually get a caving permit at Elma Pay for free, and then later on, you can go to the El Morro side and watch the bat outflight.
Yeah.
But the bats come from both areas.
Yeah. And what makes that adventure pretty cool is that you're literally like 20, 30 feet away from the bats. And these things fly out and they start to swarm the cave entrance and sort of fly around in a circular pattern. And then when it comes time to go, they all just leave.
It's like a cyclone leaving a cave.
Yeah, it's just full of bats. And you see people sitting there with blankets over their heads and all that kind of stuff like that's going to protect them, And it's just like smoke in the sky. It's crazy.
The reason is because when the little bats do the little tornado thing out of the cave, sometimes they get a little confused and they will end up in people's hair.
Yeah. Especially if you got big hair. So if you got big old hair, they're like, wah! So anyway, as they yeet to the sky, it's just kind of one of those things that you can see for free.
Yeah.
And it's worth doing. And people will show up and they, take pictures and stuff like that and experience the bat outflight. So when I seen this, I put this in here because in Arizona, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So these bats that are flying around, it's like there were so many of these bats just whizzing around that you could see it on the weather radar. And they're like, it wasn't aliens, chupacabra, or gender reveal parties gone awry either. It was bats. Specifically, thousands of Mexican freetail bats that migrate here for the summer, and then they turn around and they migrate somewhere else for the wintertime, right?
Yeah.
So they have these radar images that they put on Twitter and Facebook. Show these clouds of bats blossoming out of the city at dark. And it says, it doesn't look like a normal shower. It's like everything's just sort of fanning out. So that's the the National Weather Service meteorologist, Sean Benedict. He's like, they don't really have a uniform direction. It's usually your clue initially that it's probably animals flying around.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because I don't think they're trained in spotting anything other than clouds and rain and weird stuff like that to see. They're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of detect them most evenings throughout the summer, and then you start to get more and more towards the end of the summer. But the weather radar doesn't show how many individual bats there were or small number of bats, but they can pick up like an immense cloud.
Yeah.
So in other words, there has to be a lot of them for to actually even show up at all. So, and there's a biologist, Angie McIntyre. She's part of Arizona Game and Fish Department. She agreed with the National Weather Service assessment. It's always good to have somebody check your work, I guess. She's like, they're likely Mexican freetail bats. And they're about the size of two thumbs put together. Now, they don't say if the thumbs put together are side by side or, one on top, one in front of the other. But they can reach air speeds of up to 99 miles per hour.
That's fast.
Yep,
I didn't
so
know
they will
that.
whiz 99 miles per hour right in your big hair.
Stop.
And, the bat's going to get stuck. and start trying to claw your eyes out. So at that point, what are you going to do?
They're just trying to get free.
They're killers, Omi.
Don't hate on the bat.
I'm not hating on them, I'm just saying.
Poor little babies eat.
And they can fly as high as 10,000 feet and then dive bomb right into your big hair.
No. I'm amazed by that because, most parts of Arizona and New Mexico towards that area are already at a higher elevation.
Yeah.
So on top of whatever high elevation, and El Mape, I think, is already at like 6,000 or 7,000 feet.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And then towards Arizona, it jumps almost all the way up to 8. So 8,000 feet above sea level plus an additional 10,000. That's crazy.
Well, I don't know. Is it 8,000 plus 10,000? Or is it just plus the 2,000? Because if it's just plus the 2,000, that makes them kind of not so exciting.
Well, it's not like you or I can go 2,000 feet up.
Sure can.
On our own.
Get in a balloon.
Stop.
Aeroplane.
On our own.
Well,
but, 99 miles per hour, that's amazing.
Yeah. I don't forage nightly for insects like these guys do. They gather in colonies of hundreds of thousands of bats. So, the largest known colony of Mexican freetail bats contains 20 million bats.
That's...
According to the Bat Conservation International, which I didn't know there was a Bat Conservation International.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Oh, that's Bracken Cave, by the way.
Yeah.
If anybody was curious. So.
And Mexican freetail bats would probably be going to Mexico to spend the winter.
Yeah.
They're going down to Cabo San Lucas and all the other places that people go on these little cruises, or would go if it wasn't for COVID. Some of them stay around Phoenix when they don't have enough money for the cruise.
Would you stop?
So I thought that was kind of cool to see all those bats whizzing around and flying out of there because we have some experience with that. But yeah, if you wind up in New Mexico and you're close to Almopays or Almopai, Almopays is if you read it, Almopai is if you say it. There is a place to go see bats, and they give you a little caving permit so you can go spelunking, cost you nothing at all. And I will say, just a little warning, you should be aware that these are real caves. These aren't like Hollywood caves. They have a nice smooth bottom and stuff, rocks along the side. You're crawling over rocks the whole time.
Yeah.
So you need one of those little stupid helmets with a flashlight on it.
And it's not like caves east of the Mississippi where you might get wet or drowned. You might still drown, but anyways, we went through these caves and we were amazed because we were so dusty after going through just 20 feet.
Yeah, because you're scrambling over rocks, and typically in the desert, things are dusty.
Yeah, but it was so weird because it's just dust.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of warnings, too, about bat guano.
Yeah.
Probably don't want to eat that stuff.
And some caves might be closed to protect the bat population because of white nose syndrome.
Yeah.
Poor bats.
So, but anyway, I thought that was kind of neat. And it's well, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then that led me off to some other weird stuff. And these were strange tales of giants in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, we've actually talked a little bit about giants in New Mexico and Arizona and made mention of places that have giants or purportedly had giants back in the day. Because nobody really can agree on when giants were here, if they were here at all. Everybody that thinks they know anything about giants at all goes, well, Smithsonian come in and they'll take evidence. Like the Smithsonian has giant cops. They'll come sneaking up. But there's been the myth, that giants are walking amongst us, and it's been a common theme with many peoples. And that's true because giants have been in most every culture out there in one form or another. Mm-hmm. But apparently it popped up in the wilds of the U.S. state of Arizona, where there's been reports of uncovering remains and even having sighted living specimens of real giants for centuries. And this came from Brett Swancer, who writes for Mysterious Universe. And they're talking about one specific incident that happened in 1911 when they had heavy rains that came down through Yavapai County.
Yavapai.
Yeah, Arizona. And it says that one of those hit was a farmer by the name of Peter Marks, who lived along Walnut Creek at a place called Juniper. And it says the rains were fierce, causing heavy floods and wrecked large portions of the area. When Peter went out to survey the damage, when it was all over, he found something very strange. And poking up through the earth was what appeared to be an enormous bone. So when he dug it out, it appeared to be a giant human leg bone. And he said it was the bone itself was far larger than any known human being. And then when he kept digging, he found an array of other sized, larger bones and an immense human skull, far larger than that of a normal man. And so he found a skeleton of giant skeletons. And the skull itself was such of abnormal size that if an average man would place it over his own head, he could still find room to move backwards and forwards or up and down with ease, so he could put it on like a helmet. That's crazy, man, right?
I don't know. I just thought of like Dead Mouse concerts.
Yeah. And so when they took some measurements from the skull, they said that a number 10 hat would be required to fit it. Now, if you wear hats, or if you ever worn hats, a relatively large size is 8. You got a big jug head if you got a size 8 hat. Just saying. What size do you have there? You have a size 8?
I'm somewhere between 7 3/4.
And 8?
Maybe.
Ah.
Well, Jughead. Massive brain.
Yeah. It's my brain surrounded by a really thick skull.
Shut up.
Big jug head. But, I mean, a size 10 hat's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd have to wear a size 10 hat to substantiate the immense size of his head. That's fully 1/3 larger than those men, than the men of today. And as to the bones, there was no disputing the fact that the owner of the bones itself were symmetrically formed, immense size, and had Herculean strength. The thigh and lower limbs indicate at least twice the size of an average man of today. So they talk a little bit about the bones. They said the bones of this monstrous human may have represented once a race of giants, or it could be men or single individuals. They don't really know. But they know that the skeleton that was in possession is sufficiently complete so that the dimensions were astounding, but accurately ascertained. Yeah. So Marks continued his dig of his site where he found these bones, and he found a wide range of ancient artifacts as well. Like stone hooks to hold garments together, stone axes, butcher knives, pottery, and most oddly what appear to be metal arrowheads and spears.
Okay.
And that makes it weird because during that time, right, the natives of the region, they would have used, like stone or bone or something like that, but they probably wouldn't have had metallic weaponry.
No.
And they said at the time, this remarkable discovery was featured heavily in the newspapers, and curiosity seekers poured into the area to see the giant remains. And there was purported interest shown by the Smithsonian Institute.
Huh.
Yeah, it says, however, in the end, Marks would not let anyone take away the remains to be analyzed and stalled any attempt by the Smithsonian to appraise them because he was still deciding what to do with the skull and the bones. And after that, the whereabouts of the bones become unknown, and frustratingly, no one knows what happened to him in the end. So in 1913, they found another set of bones at Sycamore Creek, where some road construction workers dug up. The remains of the humanoid stood over 8 feet tall. Also had ancient beads that they thought dated back to the Toltec period.
Okay.
Now, I don't know when the Toltec period is, but it sounds long ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't match up with the region.
Yeah.
Basically. And like what I'm looking at right now is how oddly this kind of matches up with some of the research we did about New Mexico.
Right.
With the, I think it was Dr. Hibben, who did similar research. He was the guy who did the Sandia caves.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a cemetery full of these bones, too, where they'd been reburied.
And the Decalogue stone.
Yep.
And he was discredited. But you don't see, like this guy, he's putting up a fight, especially with the Smithsonian and all these other places.
Yeah, because the one thing in common with all these giant sort of reports that hit the newspaper and that sort of thing is that someone from the Smithsonian or a group of people from the Smithsonian will show up, and then the bones get gone. They're taken away to be appraised or looked at or validated or whatever, and they just never show up again, never heard from again.
Or
these bones go away.
If you don't give up the evidence, like in Dr. Hibben's case, it was like the stone and the cave and stuff like that, you get discredited.
Yeah.
So I think it's really kind of good that this dude put up such a fight.
Yes.
So...
And so there's been like the bones appear to be disappeared. So Marks had a problem with the bones. The bones went away. The bones that they found in Sycamore Creek somehow or another went away. And one of the interesting points to consider is that they were apparently historical sightings of actual living giants coming from that region. That's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
So one of the reports came from the expedition from Coronado, who's a New World explorer.
Oh, yeah.
And he did a voyage up the coast past Sonora, Mexico, into the borders where it bordered up into Arizona.
And New Mexico.
Yep. And to record this, it was written by a chronicler of the voyage, Pedro Castaneda, which tells the captain, Hermando de Alarcon, who went off to bring supplies for the soldiers up the coast, but soon came in contact with the ships, because the ships were lost. And Don Rodrigo Maldonado was sent out to find out what happened to Alarcon. And he couldn't find the ships that he saw, but he came back with a captive Indian, native, right, who was so tall that the tallest explorer only came up to his chest.
Wow.
So they're saying they couldn't find the ships. They sent him out to find the ships to figure out what happened. And this dude came back with a prisoner, effectively, who was, appeared to be native, but was very tall.
How did he catch him? That's weird. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I don't hit him on the head. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Probably not very nicely,
Well, Coronado's people wreaked havoc on what is now the Southwest. So. Yeah.
So they came across another tribe of giants, right? And they were still trying to establish contact with the ships and figure out what happened. So this guy, Captain Diaz, basically came across another tribe of giants. He took 25 of his most efficient men and guides, and he struck out north off to the west to search the seacoast and find the ships. And after going about 150 leagues, they came to a province of exceedingly tall, strong men like giants. They lived in large straw cabins built underground like smokehouses with only the straw roofs above the ground. We've seen this.
We saw that right outside Chaco.
Yeah, and all it really is, it's basically most of the structure's underground, but the roof itself will be open to the sky, but they cover it. And that's to keep you cool or warm, basically. Since you're underground, the temperature's kind of regulated. So, and it says they enter these houses at one end and they come out the other. And it says more than 100 persons, old and young, sleep in one cabin. And when they carry anything, they can take a load of more than 300 to 400 weight on their heads. And they said once when our men wished to fetch a log for the fire and 6 men were unable to carry it, one of these Indians is reported to have come and raised it in his arms, put it on his head alone, and carried it away very easily. So it sounds like, they went out looking for the ships, but they're interacting with this tribe. And
it sounds like they went to northwest New Mexico.
Well, maybe. It's kind of hard to say because the way New Mexico and Arizona is, who knows the boundaries back then, because New Mexico and Arizona, they're kind of like not above each other, sort of.
But I mean, like some of the descriptions, it reminds me of like some of the earlier, more primitive people in that territory right there.
That could be separate. That's the thing, though. The giant sightings sort of went from the lower part of New Mexico all the way up in through Arizona. So who knows, right?
Yeah, and then into like Utah, right? Or
possibly. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but see, that was the thing, that giants were located in a particular area. Giants were located all over the U.S., evidently.
Yeah.
With mounds and things like that. But they were sort of, some of the more recent reports, and this goes back a couple hundred years, was in the Southwest area. So, and we're talking like Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, up around through there. I think even in some parts of Idaho or something like that. So anyway.
Yeah.
But out of all those reports that they had with Captain Diaz, it's pretty much the only thing you have is like historical reports, and there wasn't like any real physical evidence. But this just goes to show that, again, from what we talked about, some of the giants, and especially with New Mexico, that there's even more reports from Arizona. And if you combine that with all the other giant reports, I mean, I don't understand why more people don't know or want to really explore the giant subject and say giants existed. Why out of all the things that can be proven, this should be proven. This should be a part of our past. We had giants here. You know what I mean? So why is that not part of our history? If the Smithsonian has been taking bones and they found evidence, and there's giants have been sort of found all over the world. So why is this not part of our human history at this point?
So one of the times we researched this and talked about this, I went and I tried to do some additional research, and the thing that bugged me the most was that certain fact-checking websites completely disputed certain things. Oh no, the Smithsonian never did anything like that. That's a snippet stolen from a movie prop, or nobody can confirm this thing. But the thing was, they were presented with so many different pieces and articles and things like that they only covered like 3 of them.
Yeah.
And even then you were like, I don't actually believe that, you know?
I mean, you've got stories of giants in all the cultures.
Yeah.
It's even in the Bible, you know, with David and Goliath, and there's other mentions of other giants as well.
And there's other cultures and other like religions that talk about giants as well.
Yeah.
But I think like from the modern, and I'm going to say this, but not in a bad way, but from the modern keyboard researcher, when you go and you try to look these things up, the top results are dismissive.
Yeah.
So anybody who's not totally into the paranormal, or they're, you know, just, you know, helicopter view or just getting into it, that sort of thing, when you try to research it, you get all these top results, or the initial layer is, oh, this is totally fake.
Yeah.
And it's funny because last year I talked to somebody at that paranormal conference in Western Pennsylvania of the Unexplained. And this was just somebody, I was taking a break from the table and he talked about this. He's like, and for some reason, you know, because I'm younger than you. I was like, thanks, dude. But he's like, I go and I try to talk about this and I look it up and I try to share the information with my friends, and their Google results are completely different than mine. And I was like, well, that's algorithms. But he's like, no, watch. If I try to do any sort of stuff and tell you to type this into your phone exactly, you're just going to get a bunch of links about how this is all not true.
Yeah. Now, we went to a paranormal conference, and I don't know if I want to talk about this here because it's something that she told me.
Yeah.
I attended a presentation from a doctor, and she basically told me that there are remains that you can go see of giants. And the only reason why she said that they were still there is because of where they're located is of little interest to the rest of the world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And she went so far as to describe some of the local topography and structures that are there that include like birthing caves. And it's been theorized that the giants go and give birth on their own, like the lady giants, and they call them birthing caves, where they go up in a cave and come back down with a baby and all this crazy stuff. And we haven't reached out to her or talked to her, and I kind of want to save that for an interview for the future if she even remembers. But so there is supposed to be evidence or evidentiary things like maybe, well, anyway, there's lots of pictures, and she's seen them with her own eyes, and she's done investigative research. And as far as I know, she's one of the only few in the world that investigate these giants specifically for the region, and she even lives there. And I don't want to say too much about it. I mean, people listening to the podcast maybe know already, so I kind of want to reach out to her and see kind of. She gave me a warning. She said, because this is something that we talked about, and I talked to her for about 36 minutes or so, because you were like hitting me up on my phone going, where are you? Are you alive?
Because he attended the talk, which was almost an hour long.
It was over an hour, yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you were just not around. So I was working the booth by myself.
And you're doing a good job.
And at the same time, I also tried to do an audio interview with somebody who really, really wanted to do an audio interview with us. And that worked out horribly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But anyway, she told me that, hey, once you start looking into this kind of thing, and if you really started to kind of talk about it and look at it, that people will start taking a look at you. And by that, I think she alluded to the Smithsonian.
Oh, you know what? I just remembered. And then like months, not even a month, like a week or two later, I was talking to Katie Stafford, and she's also very interested in the subject.
Yep.
Yeah. All y'all need to connect and do something.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So anyway, one day in the future, we may reach out and see if we can talk and maybe schedule some kind of interview with her and see if she's up for that sort of thing. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting that, you know, when it comes to giants, it seems to be that even though the evidence is there and all these accounts are there and all these instances all over the world are there, it still seems to be one of those things that doesn't have more of a foothold. I mean, people want to believe more in Bigfoot than giants, even though giants have been sort of documented everywhere.
However, I will say, like...
And people have found them and the bones have been taken. So, when people talk about Bigfoot, where's the Bigfoot skeletons, right?
Well, once you're already into the paranormal specifically, and in this case, Bigfoot, most of the Bigfoot researchers already believe in giants. A large portion, I'm not saying all of them, but a large portion of them are already open to the concept of a prehistoric or early man that was a giant. But when it comes to drawing more new people into the paranormal community, I think it's going to be hard if we start with giants, Yeah,
but, giants makes more sense.
True.
Especially when you can find, photographs and things, I'm looking right at them.
Yeah.
Anyway, just something we kind of thought was weird, kind of put it in there. It's like, oh, I know about giants because we've talked about this in the past, and we've lived in New Mexico, and we tried to find where these giants were located in a cemetery, and come to find they can't even hardly find the cemetery. And so it's become a little bit of a thing.
Yeah. And
we had made plans in the future to go to some of these areas that may or may not have giant type stuff and see what we can find. But we haven't done it. It's like, lots of things get in the way of doing this sort of thing, and it requires some. Okay. 2020, man, has wrecked a lot of things because we had made plans to do 3 or 4 different types of things that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it's all a matter of cost and time and things like that. And it seems like, 2020 was going to be the year for us to go do some things and moving into 2021. But 2020 has kind of set everybody back, I think, a little bit. But we're going to move on from that. We'll talk about that stuff later. But, okay. So aside from the strange giants in Arizona and the big bats that are whizzing around, flying out, we'll talk about this because this kind of goes along the lines of the naturalistic things. There's evidently this little-known caterpillar, this hairy caterpillar that this lady picked up, and it basically sent her to the hospital.
Ew! I'm sorry. I'm speechless because I'm looking at the picture.
Yeah, and it's the sting of a little-known caterpillar, what she calls an alien hairball. Okay, this is a Virginia lady, and since we let Virginia go to New Mexico, I had to put it in there. And the funny thing is, I didn't see this in Virginia's newspapers right away. I seen it at the Sacramento Bee, which is in California, right?
Weird, yeah.
And the title of the article goes, "Alien hairball sends Virginia woman to emergency room. It's a venomous caterpillar."
Okay.
The pus caterpillar has a severe sting for which the pain will be apparent immediately to the victim. And that's from the CDC. Mm-hmm. So a Virginia woman says she went through 22 hours of hell after brushing against a seemingly harmless ball of fuzz that turned out to be a highly venomous caterpillar.
Ew.
Yeah, so Chris Spindle Gaston of New Kent County, which I got a speeding ticket in there, that's what they do there, says that the split-second encounter that happened, this happened to her on September 4th, sent her to the emergency room in excruciating pain. The alien hairball was later identified as a pus caterpillar, a benign insect dubbed the nation's most dangerous caterpillar, according to the National Center of Biotechnology Information. First off, I didn't know this sort of thing existed. And secondly, I didn't know there was a Center of Biotechnology Information either. So, and then, of course, they talk about, other caterpillars and stuff like that are showing up now. But, I had no idea. And when she hit it, right, when she touched it or brushed it, she said she just barely brushed it. It was likened to the feeling of touching a scorching hot knife.
Yeah, and she barely brushed against it. It was on her car. So, this is a completely possible situation for anybody.
Yeah, because she said it looked like it looked like a cross between a mouse and a slug.
Ugh.
So this thing's super hairy, right? So you see this weird thing. And people said, this is kind of like they compared this caterpillar to the fictitious alien tribbles like you've seen in the TV series Star Trek from the 60s.
Yeah.
It says, "I can swear that this year is something. We thought murder hornets were bad." And she posted this on Facebook. "I just want to spread the word. If I can save one person from this hell, I'd be happy."
Oh,
and she said she'd never heard of the pus caterpillar before being stung, which is not surprising. And I'm like, how is this not surprising, right?
Yeah.
And so the view is that pus caterpillars are usually not abundant enough to be noticed. And this is from North Carolina State Extension Service, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said even the slight contact with pus caterpillar results in a severe sting for which the pain will be apparent and immediately known to the victim.
Oh, gosh.
However, their unkept hairy appearance is more goofy than threatening.
Yeah.
With National Geographic referring to them as a toxic toupee and a bad comb-over.
Yeah.
And, Wired.com made an analogy that with their headline that said, never touch anything that looks like Donald Trump's hair.
Oh.
It's teardrop-shaped, has long, silky hair, making it resemble a tuft of cotton or fur.
And that, oh, man. See, that's a thing. I would have thought it was like a dirty hairball or a dirty cotton ball stuck to my car.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it because it could be, it's almost reminiscent of maybe a bad blonde tumbleweave.
Or a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Gross, right? And it says, so it's teardrop shape, has long silky hair, making it look like a little tuft of cotton or fur. But when a pus moth or caterpillar rubs or is pressed against a person's skin, its venomous hairs are embedded, usually causing severe burning and a rash. And occasionally the reaction is more severe, causing swelling, nausea, and difficulty breathing. And they're found primarily in the southern states, if you guys are trying to figure out if you got pus caterpillars in your neck of the woods, from Texas and north to Maryland and Missouri. And that's according to the University of Michigan, who's out of the danger zone.
Oh, my God.
And it's like some people can exhibit symptoms of shock after a sting.
I would.
2 Percocet is the only way I slept through it, Gaston said.
Poor lady.
That and an ice pack strapped to my calf all night.
Oh, my God. Look at the photo of her. It's like a road rash bruise almost.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what her pain tolerance is, but for whatever it is, I'm just going to believe her that it's awful and not touch a mouse slug combination looking teardrop bad toupee gross looking thing.
Speaking of caterpillars, it's funny that we're talking about this. Look at this weird thing. I had to pull Pepper away from this, and I'm going to share it with you guys.
What is it?
This is a caterpillar.
I know it's a caterpillar. Is it as dangerous as this pus caterpillar?
I need help finding out because I was always taught any caterpillar that had like neon colors was poisonous.
Well,
and this thing had like neon colors.
That's probably a good general rule of thumb. Anything neon in the animal world is super dangerous, except for the 90s where all humans wore neon and stuff.
And parrots. Most parrots that are neon are okay, I'm pretty sure. But like I had never seen these weird caterpillars before. And then once I saw this article, it was funny. I saw this caterpillar that me and Pepper walked up on. And then I saw what is this gross caterpillar, pus caterpillar.
Yes.
I saw one on the street. It was like mushed. So.
Probably deserved it, I guess.
But that's just so weird.
So we have links to everything in our show notes. So if you want to take a look and see what this pus caterpillar looks like and you want to go all the way to our website, CreepGeeks.com, and click the link and go there, you can see it, or you can just Googleize pus caterpillar and see it for yourself. Yeah. So I think what we're going to do at this point is take a second and take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And you've been listening to the Creep Geeks Podcast.
Audible is audio entertainment that entertains, educates, and inspires. For you, listeners of Creep Geeks Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/cheapgeek. Again, that's audibletrial.com/cheapgeek for your free audiobook.
Coffee break is over.
Okay.
Okay, so flying bats, giant skeletons, pus caterpillars.
Ew.
What else?
I don't know.
Well, let me tell you. Kind of changing gears. Okay, so in the past podcast episodes that we've done, we've talked about the military probably being the cause, or at least maybe let's just say the cause of about 80% of UFO sightings. Okay. And it's just a randomly made up number that seems to be pretty accurate, at least as far as what I can see. Now, some of the thoughts that people have is that our government and our military is not advanced enough to possess the sort of technology that has these sort of UFO, alien, out of this world sort of characteristics with like flight and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of think that with military technology in general and just science and technology in general, that we're probably way ahead of what we actually know to be true as a regular person.
Okay.
And one of the things I came across from Defense News, which I don't normally read, kind of caught me off guard a little bit, because the way it kind of works with like some of these projects that are out there, if the military wants a new plane, they basically send out like a request, like, hey, we would like a new advanced fighter jet. And they send it out to these defense contractors, and they come back with like an idea, or a general sort of like, hey, we can do that for you, and here's what we're going to do. And then, with depending on the stipulations of the request and the defense contract that goes out, there may or may not be a prototype involved, and it kind of goes from there. So you have these defense contractors that can say, this is what we provide, this is what it's going to be. All this stuff turns into a thing, and eventually, hopefully, you wind up with like an advanced fighter jet or whatever, and the military says, okay, we're going to buy like 30 of these things, and life is good.
Okay.
What makes this article different from defensenews.com is it says the U.S. Air Force has built and flown a mysterious full-scale prototype of its future fighter jet. So the military built their own future fighter jet. This is unusual.
Okay. But so if it's their own future jet, where did they come up with the concept?
They're military. They probably would know, I would think, right, of what they want. And they're smart people in the military. Unlike what a lot of people have been led to believe, people that serve in the military, not all of them are like dumb, and are uneducated, and all the nasty stereotypes that go along with that. A lot of them are brilliant people that serve in the military, period. They're smart, they're intelligent, they serve in positions that lends themselves to be really valuable members of society when they get out. And some of the most, some of the most advanced people in the world serve in the military or have served in the military. Now, previously we talked about the U.S. Navy and a couple of scientists, or at least one in particular, who's been putting out patents and basically trying to patent alternate forms of propulsion. Remember that?
Yeah.
And anti-gravity type propulsion. And here we are looking at this thing where the Air Force secretly designed, built, and flown at least one prototype of its enigmatic next-generation fighter jet.
Huh.
And so the last time they saw the first flight of an experimental fighter, and this was during, when they were trying to come up with a joint strike fighter contract, was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they said, with the Air Force's future fighter program still in its infancy, the rollout and successful first flight of a demonstrator was not expected for years. So they've gone basically from idea to prototype in a record amount of time. And so we've already built and flown a full-scale flight demonstrator in the real world, and we broke records in doing it. We are ready to go and build the next-generation aircraft in a way that has never happened before. And so the Air Force's Airspace and Cyber Conference is where the news was broken. It says, almost every detail about the aircraft itself will remain a mystery due to the classification of the next-generation air dominance program and the Air Force's effort for fielding a family of connected air warfare systems that include fighters, drones, and other network platforms in space or in the cyber realm. And this guy, his name is Roper. He declined to comment on how many prototype aircraft have been flown or which defense contractors manufacture them. And he wouldn't say where or when the first flight took place. And he also refused to divulge any aspect of the aircraft's design, its mission, whether it was crewed or uncrewed, and whether it could fly at hypersonic speeds, or if it has stealth characteristics.
That's a lot of questions unanswered.
And as well it should be.
I know, but
what he's saying, though, is he's saying that that's all beside the point.
Yeah, and that's the problem, though, because the big news is the fact that the military actually announced it, but every single critic and every single small view is going to be like, why aren't there details?
And I'm going to say my own personal experience and opinion is that's none of everybody's business.
Need to know.
Yeah. Because what a lot of people don't, when they hear this sort of thing, they immediately think, I, as a taxpayer, have the right to know.
Transparency.
Yeah. And I say, no, you don't. Because there are other people out there that may not be as well-intentioned as you are. Those people are called spies. And they take these secret designs and they build their opposing aircraft, and the war in advancing technology continues to escalate. So you got to keep some things quiet. You don't want people to know what you have. And if that means that your uncle doesn't need to know every detail about an advanced top secret fighter, too bad.
Okay.
Too bad. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, look, and I understand, the military, they work for me and I'm a taxpayer and all this stuff. I get it. But at the same time, not everybody needs to know everything. People can't keep their mouths shut. There are people out there that are not honest about the whole thing. So I don't care. I'm like, you know what? I want to know that we are the most advanced military in the world, so we can defend ourselves against whatever may come our way. I'm all right with that. And it's only because I was in the military.
But is this a breadcrumb to try to reaffirm that belief? Or is this a breadcrumb that we have to add to the thousands of breadcrumbs for the theory that most of what we see in the skies is our own technology?
Possibly.
Okay.
They're not going to tell us. And I kind of think that most of it, if not the majority of what we see, is our own technology. And here's why this whole thing is important. Is that just after a year after the service completed an analysis of the alternatives, the Air Force has proven it can use cutting-edge advanced manufacturing techniques to build and test a virtual version of its next fighter, and then move on to constructing a full-scale prototype and flying it with mission systems on board. They did it in a year. Why did it take 20 years for a defense contractor to make the previous fighter? And they're paying that entire 20 years. They're steadily paying. The government is paying to make this happen.
Yeah.
The Air Force did it in a year. That's less cost overall. So in other words, if you have these defense contractors that may or may not be stringing along the government, keep continually asking for money, if it takes 20 years of you constantly giving them money, but the Air Force itself can do it in a year, I like that cost savings. That's like having a contractor say, yeah, I can put a deck on your house and it takes them 20 years to do it. Whereas you basically say, I'm going to do it myself and it only takes you a year. In the end, it's better. The cost will be lower. I mean, you go, and plus the turnaround. You go from having the technology where it is to a fully functional strike fighter craft and all this crazy stuff, all the technology built into it in a year. That's a very quick turnaround time.
I'm just thinking.
Because by the time you get done with that 20-year-old aircraft design and everything else, you're already way behind the power curve.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That's like saying, hey, man, we're going to design this simple camper van that you can go do investigations with, and it's going to have all these wonderful attributes into it, and then you get it 20 years later, and everything out there is more advanced than what you already have.
Well, that's most RVs anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
Up until recently, I will say, yeah.
We're going to take this RV and make it the most modern RV you've ever seen, and then you look at it, and it still has the wood paneled doors and all the goofy orange carpet and stupid crap that all the RVs have had over time. Whereas, this person makes his own RV and it's got like nice cabinets and, cement countertops, and it looks modern and sleek.
But see, this also kind of reaffirms some things that I've talked about with my little brother about, I guess, lately the military retaining some of those more intelligent sophisticated, the highly intelligent people. Well, most of those highly intelligent people move off in the private sector and go work for these defense contractors. And now they're not. Well, they may or may not be, but if, a lot of people leave the military because it becomes a stagnant thing. They can't move anywhere. There's no lateral movement, or there's more lateral movement than upper movement, which means there's less opportunities for advancement, because money is always a concern, right? Yep. And now if they're doing things like this, it opens up the door
to maybe remove some of that, to maybe keep some of these key personnel, keep some of these important personnel in the military, and maybe make it better. Because like one of the quotes is here, says, we're going after the most complicated systems that have ever been built and checked all the boxes with this digital technology. In fact, we've not just checked the boxes, we've demonstrated something that's truly magical.
Yeah.
And now the Next Generation Air Dominance Program, or NGAD, as they're calling it, which sounds stupid, sits at a decision point. It's like, how quickly can they move this into actual production? And the only thing that he would say, Roper said, was that they can do pretty fast. But before the service decides to begin doing the new or next generation of fighters, it must be determined how many aircraft it will commit to and when it wants to start purchasing those aircraft.
Yeah.
And all those choices could influence the 2022 budget. So I think that's great because if the Air Force can do it, why can't some of the other military branches do the same thing? Because nobody knows what the U.S. Navy needs more than the U.S. Navy. Nobody knows what the Army needs more than the Army. So if they can implement the similar programs and design their own technology and make the technology work for them, it becomes better, I think. It becomes more useful, becomes more efficient, and less costly. Let them do it.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you're fighting all these contract points. You know, you're the Navy, you want a new ship, and you put it out there, and you get these design ideas back, and you're going through fighting line by line and what you can keep, what you have to get away because of budgetary concerns. If you could get everything that you need and or want, and it's cheaper, faster, easier turnaround time, why not? This is going to make some of these defense contractors have to completely change how they're doing business.
Yeah.
Don't sound so less excited by this. This is good news. Or at least I think. It just opens up the door. Now, what if they've secretly been doing this for a long time, and then some of the technology that we're actually seeing in the skies really is something that's been in place for a long time?
I don't know, because with that, I'm kind of like, with as bad as the U.S. government has been at keeping secrets for some things and other things too well, I just feel it would have leaked more significantly by now.
Well, over the past 50 years, the U.S. industrial base has dwindled from 10 manufacturers capable of building an advanced fighter to only 3 defense companies, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman. And so the time it takes the Air Force to move from a new fighter, from research to development to full rate production, has stretched from a matter of years to multiple decades.
Yeah.
So if the government, as in the military, is trying to prove a point to the government that, hey, we can do this faster, better, cheaper, I think that you'd see a lot of prototypes maybe up there whizzing around, flying and stuff so they could prove their point.
And I think when
it might add to the number of sightings that occur.
And faster, better, cheaper, people always hang on that word cheaper. I want to say faster, better, streamlined, affordable.
At the end of the day,
yeah,
cheaper works in Congress. Cheaper works in the Senate. That's all they care about.
And I like the streamline because going with what I was saying earlier, you know, there should have been a leak by now and you know, like Bob Lazar type leak.
Well,
but if you take it all internal, it's less likely for something like that to happen. So moving forward, if we enter this phase where everything is done internally within the United States government and the military, we're going to get less information.
Yeah, but what if it already has? What if the whole disclosure thing that a lot of people are latching onto, saying that the government is disclosing that these things actually exist, is already occurring and taking place?
It's just not existing in the form that we want it to be, which should be...
Which is like, wow, that's definitely not ours. That's somewhere else's, right?
Yeah.
Well, what they're saying is that there's a result in a 25% increase in development costs and an 18% increase in production costs, right? But the price of modernizing an aircraft would drop by 79% while sustainment costs are basically cut in half. So the price of the aircraft initially would be slightly up, but the cost to maintain and own that aircraft and upgrade it would be substantially less. Which kind of goes towards, like, let's just use a car, like a Toyota or a Honda, right? They typically cost a little more than some of the other brands out there, but the cost is in ownership.
Yeah.
There's less maintenance costs. There's less fix-it costs with some of these vehicles when you compare them to others. And I'm looking at comparison. Let's just do like from the 70s, right? The cost of ownership to own like a Chrysler, GM, or Ford product was pretty inexpensive, but the cost of repair, they didn't even make their engines to last more than 100,000 miles ever, because they wanted you to come back and pay for those repairs. Whereas the foreign markets came across, I'm talking primarily Japanese, where you take a Toyota, put 100,000 miles on, that's break-in miles. You're still going to be good for another 100,000 miles. And so it kind of makes sense in some ways.
Yeah.
So if they're putting all this technology in place and they have the capability of building this sort of thing and making it come out quicker, better, faster, stronger, maybe slightly more expensive in the beginning, but less in the end, they've got to be testing this stuff. So we're talking like hypersonic weapons, hypersonic vehicles, maybe vehicles that are capable of doing the space flight, all of that stuff. Maybe this is all part of what's going to lead to not necessarily disclosure, but the release of surprising military technology, because maybe they're getting to a point where they can't keep some of this stuff secret anymore.
Okay.
Because it's hard to fly something that advanced if you have such a small window to do it in.
So the common perception of disclosure, which is that we're going to get little green men coming down and saying, we're real, we're here. It's not that perception. What we're going to get is actually us as a society, or us as a civilization, acknowledging that we are capable of this technology and letting the
we can take a jet and fly out in space and fly back again.
Letting the common man be aware of it.
Right.
Okay. Which I'm fine with. I mean, if we at least acknowledge what we're capable of, I think I'd be better with that. Oh,
sure.
Yeah.
Like the stealth bomber and the stealth fighters, they were secret for a while, and then all of a sudden they became unsecret.
Yeah.
And they're to the point where all these opposing countries were having a really hard time wrapping their heads around it. And it just got to the point where you got to let them do their thing. You got to let them do what they were designed to do. So maybe this is all part of it. I, for one, would like to see the military be able to do that and save us all a little bit of money. Because it probably takes away a lot of the restrictions that are put in place by Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman. So I'm like, man, if they can do that and this becomes a commonplace thing, man, that might save us a ton of money. Because, a lot of these projects, it goes back to the whole, like, you paid $15,000 for one hammer.
Yeah.
When they're secretly siphoning off money to other black box projects and stuff. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought that I came across from reading the article and kind of like, So it's all connected. So if disclosure is connected to maybe possibly these sightings in military technology, which is way more advanced than what we've been led to believe or what we know, who's to say other things aren't connected?
Okay.
So according to this article that we came across, where it says UFOs, the occult, and the paranormal and supernatural are all connected, that explains a lot. Right?
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap around everything we've talked about being connected.
It's all connected. Okay, the increased number of UFO sightings in the skies may not actually be UFOs.
Okay.
They may be military craft. The military disclosure,
bats.
Well, yeah, including bats, right? Or the military disclosure involved with all that sort of thing may not be something that's like, oh, cat's out of the bag. It may be, sort of priming us all towards what we're going to start seeing. Because if the government came out right now and said, we have drones that use alternate propulsion as an anti-gravity propulsion to whiz around the world at impossible speeds, we'd be like, what? But if they're allowing us to dip the toes in the pool to get used to it, then it won't be such a shock when you see these things flying around at 1,000,000 miles an hour, breaking all the laws of physics that you know in your limited capacity. Because, if they came across and said, we have these things that can fly using anti-gravity propulsion, that's like Buck Rogers type stuff.
Okay.
And a lot of people won't, I think, respond good to it. So if it's like, let's turn the temperature up 1 degree at a time until it gets to the point where none of this is a shock, I think it's going to be more accepted, more willing for people to want to believe in that kind of thing. So if you look at UFOs, the occult, and paranormal, including supernatural, if it's all connected in some way, that would make sense, because that explains a lot. Because what people are starting to realize is there's a lot of commonalities that happen between UFOs, the occult, paranormal, supernatural, right? You've got these fights that used to be like using Bigfoot, for example. Bigfoot's a natural animal. Then you have the other side of that that says, no way, man, Bigfoot's a supernatural animal because it can do these things that put it into the supernatural realm.
Or as Greg Newkirk puts it, Bigfoot's a ghost.
Right.
Or ultra-terrestrial.
Right. And the natives believe that Bigfoot is one of these animals that exists on multiple planes.
Yeah, so he would be an ultra-terrestrial.
Right. So what if it's all related? And this kind of goes back to my theory that I've talked about on the podcast before, like with Thunderbirds, for example. They fly, they're doing their own thing, they pop through a portal and whiz through our reality, our existence for a time being, and then they pop back to theirs because they're just doing their own thing. They don't know.
One moment they're in their reality, the next moment they're flying over a highway in Indiana.
Sure, it's like a parallel universe type thing, which scientists are starting to prove that there is a parallel universe and that it used to exist. So if that makes sense, then it might be possible for things that we see, like Bigfoot, to be in one reality, disappear, go into another reality, and come back. It would explain everything, right? It would explain how Loch Ness Monster can be seen in the loch, but not be able to sustain itself or exist in the loch because there's not enough food for it to eat and it's too cold. So if all of that can exist at the same time, then everything that we think is right.
Well, and I don't know. I would have to take this in very small doses.
Well, absolutely. It's like dipping your toe in the pool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that stands out for me most, and this is by Nick Redfern, who wrote this, he's already highlighted the subject of how ufology is clearly connected to things like Bigfoot and, stuff like that. Bigfoot, supernatural events, things like that, because every single supernatural event that is recognizable usually has some sort of ufology or something in the skies event related before or after it. And for me, that's where I make the everything's connected connection.
You could go that way too. In other words, if it's always happened and it's always occurred, then it's all true, right? It's all happened. Like if you look at like alien abduction cases, they're not a recent thing. No. It used to be because of the popularity with books like Communion and even movies like Fire in the Sky with Travis Walton, that it just, in Project Blue Book in the 50s and stuff like that, or in the late 40s into the 50s, that just became a more modern thing. But what if you look at that sort of things back to the past, like what if it's called something different, like an incubus or a succubus? And some of the little demons that you see or are described could be alien greys or something like that.
Rumpelstiltskin stealing your kid.
Like fairies, dwarves, gnomes, all of that sort of thing. What if it has always occurred? And then it gets identified as something else and then is occurring now. What if it's all connected? Like it's the past, the present, the future. It's all there and it has always happened. And so how does that facilitate the beliefs that we have now?
I don't know, because it for me, the challenge is the fact that the belief is constantly being relabeled as something.
That's part of it.
So that's where I think my limited understanding, I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. I have to go all the way back to, back in Roman times, the gods used to kidnap humans, back in European history.
Yeah, so what if those gods are actually Nephilim? And then it keeps going back, and then what if, all this occurred because the original race that was put here was here to mine gold.
But.
Right. And then the leftovers, the hybrids is what sort of,
I mean, is the article that we just talked about with the U.S. Air Force acknowledging that they're capable of technology, is that us getting more familiar with this phenomenon and how everything's connected? That's where I'm like...
It could be, because if you think about, if you tie it all together by looking at some of the sightings that have been reported as being UFOs, right? Unidentified flying objects. When you say UFO, immediately the first thing you think of is aliens. Little green men.
Okay.
If you say unidentified aerial phenomenon, that opens the door to the possibility that it's not just, UFOs, little green men, that you might be seeing technology.
Mysterious drones in Colorado, or a floating sphere,
or the tic-tac or fast mover shapes that have whizzing across that have been seen back in. So if you say, let's relabel this as unidentified aerial phenomena, now you can incorporate other countries' technologies, new technology, undisclosed technology.
So
you're being specific so that you're not including the UFO.
This goes back to, though, how do you interconnect this without looking like that Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme?
That's the part of it. You have to pick the part that you want and work it through to the beginning. And then everything branches off of it. So if you look at that and you go back, let's look at Ancient Aliens, right, where they show what appears to be in ancient carvings and stuff like planes flying overhead, helicopter, all this crazy stuff. Then you have to look at like time. Did a time slip occur? Because a time slip can explain all sorts of crazy things. A time slip would be, whereas your time is relevant to you, however, something slips through at a relevant time for them, and those two bridges sort of connect, and then you experience something that's not of your time. Like you're a Roman soldier on the battlefield, and you see jets flying overhead because of a time slip. Or you're driving on that road in Indiana and see a pterodactyl flying by because of a time slip.
Or that Rendlesham experience where the fighter suddenly experienced what could have been described as modern.
Yeah, or the possibility of a Nazi bell using alternate technology disappears in 1940 whatever and shows up in like 1960 whatever in Pennsylvania in Kecksburg.
Yeah.
Because of time slipping, which means that time would run along with parallel dimensions and parallel universes could all run concurrently together. It's all happening all at the same time.
Okay.
So if you do all that and you start to put it all together, who's to say that the technology that the government currently has is from aliens, or is it from us in the future, or is it, based off of an alien interaction in the past? It's all sort of related. And what if you have the shadows that sort of fill in the gaps, like ghosts? Like ghosts exist in their time and in our time at the same time. Because of time slippage and parallel dimensions and portals and all this other stuff.
But that kind of wipes away the supernatural or almost spiritual aspect of ghost and paranormal phenomenon.
Not necessarily. Because they could be conjured.
Okay. I'm following you on that.
So, if all this is interconnected somehow, and the only thing that sets it apart as far as being a different way to look at this sort of thing is the ability of your mind to be able to look and see all these alternate, let's just call them directions, and your soul is the anchor that anchors you to all of that sort of thing, then it may be a direct reflection of your intent can influence whatever time slip you're in, whatever parallel universe you exist in, all of that sort of thing. So you become relevant to you, and everything is relevant to you. In other words, because you are relevant, you make everything else relevant.
Okay.
And that goes back to some of the new theories that scientists are having that, hey, when you dream, and sometimes you have these crazy dreams that are hyper-realistic and they don't make sense to you, it's because you're actually looking into a parallel universe or an alternate dimension. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm having a hard time wrapping it coherently, or cohesively, I should say.
Yeah.
Together with what we've recently talked about.
Now, what if there's an organization that's completely aware of all this stuff and has done their jobs to try to research it and sort of keep things in check, and you run across like Men in Black, the Watchers, Knights of Templar, or the Templar Knights. There's always a fringe organization that seems to be aware of shit that nobody else is. And you know what I mean? So what if these people are on the outside? Like, look at some of these Tibetan monks that die but aren't dead. You know what I mean? Like all this crazy. What if you can tap into that sort of energy, or you're aware of it, and it makes you all part of this entire thing? And everything we're talking about is not necessarily related to the article that sort of kicked the idea in gear for me anyway, which is the one by Nick Redfern. But the idea of everything being connected kind of starts to make sense, because this is becoming sort of a popular topic that you're going to see blowing up and becoming even more popular with paranormal researchers and UFO or ufologists and cryptid hunters and stuff, because they're all starting to say the same thing now. You notice that? It's
funny, because we always talked about how, hey, we're going to talk about it all. And now everybody is putting the breadcrumbs together that not only are we talking about it all, but it's all related if you tie the strings and make the connections.
Yeah. I mean, just because you can explain something doesn't mean that's what it is or what really happened. You know what I mean? Just because you can find an explanation. And so when you start looking at it like that, you start to see that some things that can't be explained based off of your relevancy, like say you're a UFO dude and you're purely a UFO guy.
Yeah.
And you see all these events occurring, all these sightings and things like that. And you're like, disclosure's coming. We see too many of these things happening. It's about to blow up.
Yeah.
But then you have the other side of that, conspiracy side of that, which would be it's government technology and you're just seeing more of it. And then you have another fringe group is like, all these sightings are falling in line because it's really angels and it's demons. You know, just because you can explain it doesn't mean that's actually what's going on.
It's your perception or scope of what's happening.
And your perception and scope really is your relevancy to what's occurring. Because everybody has a different perception. So if I see, and that goes back to some of the things that you hear where people are out in the woods together, one person sees Bigfoot behind a tree, the next person sees a Wendigo behind a tree. They see something behind a tree, but to one person it's completely different than what the other one's seen.
Or the sightings where there's a cryptid like a dogman or a Bigfoot, but then also within the same time period and same location, there's also an alien gray sighting. And it's like...
And a lot of times it's all preceded by a flash, green flash, some kind of bright light that's popped up, and then, you know, all this...
Or the cone of silence, the silence.
Or the missing 411, right? Where a big storm showed up, a big bright flash, right? Boom, there's Bigfoot. Somebody winds up gone.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, I seen a UFO, and somebody says, I seen Bigfoot, and somebody says, I didn't see anything at all. And it's like what it goes back to the paranormal mist that gets talked about a lot with Mysterious Universe. If you see a mist, run. You know what I mean? It's like, don't hang around, just run.
You know, me and Stephanie, when we were looking for that cabin that doesn't exist, she started to make the decision we should turn around when the mist started.
Okay, when we were at the TNT domes in the Mothman area, there was a low-lying mist that showed up towards the end of the day when you walked right past me. Yeah. I'm yelling your name, and the dog didn't. I thought you guys are angry at me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that makes sense. I've done something to anger you. But the ignoring part was the part that is really unusual because you wouldn't ignore me because you have a tendency to want to fight back. And that's what was really disturbing. And there was a low-lying mist because I was just thinking, okay, it was relatively warm. Now it's starting to cool off because we were there in, September?
Yeah.
Or was it November?
No, it was November. Yeah.
And the water was green and warm, obviously. When you get like that sort of green algae.
That means there's a warmth to the ground and that it's heated from either beneath or it retains heat.
Sure. Or it's a creepy paranormal mist that made us lose time.
I mean, and it's one thing for you to say, like, I ignored you, but here, everybody, Pepper didn't hear him either.
Yeah.
And if he shouts, Pepper pays attention. She didn't hear him either.
Yeah.
Were you going to say you're the boss man?
Of her, yeah. I'm the dominant, going to give you a dog biscuit dude.
Yeah.
Animals, you know what I'm saying? But it was just a weird thing. So if the relevancy, if the experience or perception you have is dependent on your relevancy, then all of this stuff is all connected. If it's all about you. The difference is when you start to lump in groups of people. They all have the same experience, but it's all different because perception changes things. So if the trickster influence is what a lot of people talk about, is really not trickster at all. It's just how your perception changes the event that you are perceiving because of your relevancy to the whole thing. Like you're the North Star and everything. That's not really a trickster element. It's just your perception is warping how it occurs, and everybody sees things a little bit differently.
And see, I try to stray away from perception and go more towards just the general human experience.
Yeah, but you can't do that because people perceive things different, and that affects the human experience. Like a kid who doesn't wear glasses or has never worn glasses has no idea that lush green grass you're looking at is made up of individual blades. To them, they see a furry green carpet.
But his experience is that furry green carpet, up until one moment, has always just been grass.
Sure, but my experience is it's always been grass.
And he can live his full life without glasses, just knowing that experience.
But what's relevant to him would be that green furry carpet that he's always dealt with isn't really that green furry carpet. It's something made up of individual blades. That completely affects his perception from there on out. Mm. Yep. I will give you another argument, and this works for every man who's married.
Okay.
Is it olive green? Is it brown? Or is it tan? You get those stupid pants that nobody knows if they're green, they're brown, or they're tan.
Thanks to Columbia Outdoor Gear, there's now a new color, stone gray.
Yeah, which doesn't make any sense at all because I'm seeing brown, you're seeing gray. And at the end of the day, you're trying to match it to a shirt, and either you're going to look great or you're going to look like a fool because you can't match your clothes.
But up until this moment, your experience was limited to everything other than stone gray, which I just threw out.
Yeah, but we're talking olive drab. Is olive drab green or is it brown? That's like saying, what's the difference between light tan and sand?
Olive is at the beginning, so that makes it in the green family.
You would say it, but there's also black olives, there's also brown olives, and there's green olives.
It's like a
prefix. into your face.
No.
Yep.
I'm right.
Nope.
In my experience, I am right.
Okay. In your relevancy, and as you see things and is relevant to you, you're right. But to me,
in your
not
perception,
so much.
You're right.
And what's relevant to me, no. And the trickster element is you're both right.
And I hate that.
That's what it is.
Because that makes me, especially when I interact or interview people with very, very unusual experiences, and their perception of what happened, goes against the grain of what I believe in. But ultimately, we're both right. Their experience is 100 their experience.
Yeah.
And my perception is 100 my perception. And I may be right in many of my viewpoints.
Well, the trickster element would be that there are certain things that happened that you can agree with and that they can agree with.
Okay.
And it gives you that little bit of common ground, which changes the perception. Like if they said I was out in the woods and it was cold, dark, and wet, and I seen this, and you were there and you didn't see what they saw. You seen something different, but you would agree that it's cold, wet, and dark.
Okay.
See, there you go. You have that common ground, and now it becomes the relevancy part. What's relevant to you based off your perception, which is relevant to them based off their perception. And that's why this thing will never actually be fixed. Paranormal, supernatural, 410, whatever will never be fixed. Because you've got some people that see Bigfoot as being a naturalistic animal, and other people see him as being a spiritual animal. And then you got the people that see it's in between, and then you got the people say, I have no idea if this is relevant or not, but I've never seen it at all.
You got people who think aliens are angels. You got people who think aliens are aliens. You have got people who think aliens are some top secret U.S. government project.
And then you got people that say aliens basically cloned Bigfoot and they turned Bigfoot into sort of a controllable drone to have them run out and do all the off-road stuff that they can't do. Because they are an all-terrain animal. If they are a real deal, they've got the long hair, they've got the long stride, they have the long flat footprint, they have the strength, they have everything that's necessary to go out into the woods and complete a task. No problem.
Okay.
It's all related, man.
The ghosts, though, and the shadow people, I guess, could definitely be explained with the multi-dimension theory.
Sure.
The other stuff, though, I'm still trying to...
Well, I mean, all that relevancy stuff really depends on what's relevant to you right then. I
know a lot of people who know us from like the tech perspective and the logical perspective. They'd be good to expect this, but then with me moving away from tech and slowly becoming a little more spiritual, that's where I have my dilemmas. Like, how do I integrate the spiritual aspects of this? I mean, yes, you did great justice with the fact that, conjuring is how things correlate.
Well, what is conjuring? It's intent.
Yeah.
So if you're setting the stage already for the experience that you want.
I don't think anybody sets the stage to want to encounter.
You want to have some kind of interaction. What you actually get, that's all about relevancy and perception. Because if you take it to the base layer, I want an interaction. The interaction I got was one that was not expected and was not pleasurable in my experience, but I got what I wanted, which was interaction. I mean, why do you conjure? So my intent was communication of some kind, and I got it. And then people would say, since you have no control over that sort of thing, you tempted fate. and fate determined what you got.
But how does that explain things like monsters, like Wendigo and Skinwalker, or the lizard lady of Hawaii? Or
what if they already exist in another notion, and that by you going out and having an experience, whether it's intentional or basically maybe subconscious, you sort of open the door for that. And like they say, hey, if you're shining bright like a flashlight in the paranormal world, stuff finds you. And you got those happy-go-lucky people that will have that experience because they're just like a bright, shiny light bulb. And that light attracts good stuff and bad stuff and everything in between.
That would still require that the folklore be transferred to that person.
Well, sure. If the folklore has some degree of fact behind it because of the set of circumstances that caused that thing to begin or be in the first place, you just stepped into it. See, because you're looking at awareness. If you're not aware, then you have no control. Like if you look at the little mouse out there in the field eating seeds, he may not be aware that hawk is 1,000 feet above him and can see him. He might become aware at the last moment because his instinct will come on. The intent of that mouse is to eat seeds and thrive another day. That's his complete intention. But maybe out there, because his intent was to go eat, he went out in the field. That drew the attention of the hawk and set in a chain of events that he has no control over. Okay,
so that's where I guess you're using intent in a different way. Okay.
Well, the intent is your action. The intent is the action, but the intent can also be, I'm going to call upon something that I really have no business doing and I have no control over. If your intent is to go out in the woods and see something, you will see something.
Yeah, but
if your intent is to go do something and you do it and the results you get are great, that's awesome. If the results aren't what you're looking for, at the end of the day, is it something that you could have controlled or not control? And see, those are the parts that everybody has an issue with.
Yeah, because I'm sitting there like, okay, in colonial America and Canada, that hunter who's going out at night, or in Hawaii where that fisherman is going out and fishing at night, he had no intention of coming upon a monster like the lizard lady or the Wendigo.
Yeah, but then
it happened and they got
right. But you also have to look at the other facts involved, where maybe he was told through lore or through learning that you should not go fishing at night because these things can happen.
Okay.
And the intent of him going out and getting a fish, he weighed against the warnings or the lore behind it and said, that doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go do it. And so whatever he reaped, he sowed, kind of a thing. Mm. Because we have the ability to make so many different choices, right? So there's never just one pure choice that's absolutely 100% correct. And this is where it's all sort of tied together. Everything is connected, and it makes sense. So if everything is connected, whether you're looking at all this stuff or even the things that you draw upon yourself, and the intent doesn't go the way you want, maybe there were some factors you should have considered.
But I would go and say that hunter, that fisher, may not have been told that myth or that folklore.
Okay, well, maybe he didn't pay attention, or maybe he didn't learn, or maybe he hasn't learned that yet. And that's part of expanding upon yourself and developing yourself into whatever you're going to turn into.
I don't know.
There's no winning, but it's all connected. But if you want to read Nick Redfern's article, which is completely unrelated to what we were just talking about, but it does have the title, which I thought was interesting, which is UFOs, the Occult, the Paranormal, and the Supernatural, all connected. It does a good job of basically showing some things that can sort of bleed into other beliefs. And if you look at the paranormal community as a whole, or Fortean community as a whole, UFOs are becoming connected to Bigfoot, are becoming connected to ghosts. All of that stuff has sort of become relevant
Men in
altogether.
Black, he even has a great little section where he starts discussing the black-eyed children phenomenon.
Sure.
So
it can all be related. But anyway, I just thought we'd kind of bring it up. And we're about at the point of the podcast where we're just about done.
Yeah. No, it's funny that we are talking about this because we just got in the mail a book that kind of wraps around a lot of these topics. And I'm so excited. I've gotten as far as like the first 2 pages, so eventually we'll talk about it. I know.
A whole 2 pages.
Hey, I've been busy, okay? But Shannon LeGro, she sent us Beyond the Fray, Paramalgamation, and I have started to read it, and it does a really great job at tying a lot of the interconnected weirdness together. So maybe we'll break that book down a little bit on a future episode.
Well, maybe we'll give her a call and have her break it down.
Oh, yeah. That'd be a good idea.
Yeah. We got the Facebooks. We can reach out. But yeah, I think everything is starting to become even more and more connected. So anyway, we just thought we'd kind of talk about that a little bit. But it is sort of fortuitous that...
Kudos to anybody who can make the correlations and make the threads connect in a cohesive manner.
Yeah. Well, normally what happens is that person that can do that winds up picking one area of specificality and stays with it.
Specificality.
I just made it up. I was trying to say specifics or specificality. Whatever, man. They find that road and they stay on it because it's too hard. There's too many trails to take.
Okay.
So, anyway, I think it's about all we're going to do for the CreepGeeks podcast. CreepGeeks Paranormal and Weird News podcast. So, appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let us know. If you like the podcast and all the stuff that we talk about, you should rate us on your podcatcher. So, whatever you listen to the podcast on, whether it's iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Pandora, or anything like that, and you want to give us a rating, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Or new Amazon Music.
Yeah, we're on Amazon. Yeah, that'd be really cool. But any questions, comments, concerns, let us know. But yeah, see you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye.